growing concerns about the economy, and questions you should ask about your estate planning. I'm Erik Brenner. Join me right now on Your Wealth Health. Welcome to another episode of Your Wealth Health. I'm Erik Brenner, President and CEO of Hilltop Wealth Solutions. I'm glad you could join me today. We're going to talk about the economy and what's happening as of late, and then we're going to dive into estate planning. Estate planning really has more and more people have been aware of estate planning. They're talking about it since we've been through this going through this global pandemic, and so we're going to address that as well. But before we do that, we want to talk about just an overview of the economy, what the Fed has done and said. So if you take a look at the first graphic, it talks about interest rates will remain zero. That's what the Fed has stated. They've expanded business lending. So we're seeing more and more businesses getting lending, which includes the Payroll Protection Program and other programs, as well as they have stated that Congress needs to have more relief. And we do believe more relief is coming. You know, we have talked in the past shows about these really have not been stimulus from Congress. It's been more of a relief package. And so we believe there's going to be more needed as we continue on throughout the year. A recent quote that our Fed Chairman Powell stated is, "This is the time to use great fiscal power of the United States to do what we can to support the economy and try to get through this with as little as damage to the longer run productivity capacity of the economy as possible." So if you see that, they're really willing to do what it takes, and they've stepped up, and they really reacted quickly to that. We feel that there was a lot of learning in 08, 09. There were a lot of folks that are still on the Fed that were involved in 08, 09, and so they really helped at least plug somewhat of the hole when all of this started back in early March. So as we have been doing the last several weeks, we are practicing social distancing, and I have Bill Davis and Matt Aurenz on the show again today. They're private wealth advisors with the firm, and so I appreciate them joining me remotely. So Bill, is the Fed doing what they need to do?
You know, I believe they really are, Erik. This is, as you said, they learned a big lesson in 08, 09. And they maybe kind of baby stepped it and learned that, from their mistakes this time. And so I think it's just an unprecedented amount of capital that's going to be flowing into not only businesses, but into the fixed income markets and any other place that they believe will help. They're going to infuse that capital into the economy. So I think they are. And looks like, Congress will continue to support the efforts that on their side of the equation, while the Federal Reserve continues to put business stimulus and help this economy get going again.
So let's just take a look at a highlight, Bill, if we could, and look at individuals, $560 billion. Large cap corporations, $500 billion from the CARES Act. Small businesses, $380 billion. State and local governments, $340 billion. These numbers just seem to kind of get more and more natural, even though we're talking about a lot of money. And Matt, what we thought we would do is break down a little bit more as to where the money's going. I know recently we looked at a graphic that showed a lot of the different breakdowns,
Right.
but we really couldn't show that on screen. It was just too much information. But let's just talk in general, kind of where the funding is going specifically.
Sure. You can take a look at this graphic here. It kind of gives you a little bit of that. I think most people have already seen, what's been going to individuals through the monthly, the one-time stimulus checks. We've seen what's gone to large corporations, around $500 billion. small businesses getting kind of two relief packages at about 380 billion each. State and local governments at 340, and that's again to help a lot of the municipals with just random sources of funding to keep their local governments going, whether it be through the municipal bond market or just benefits overall for the state municipalities. But then we start seeing public health care, student loans, and again, student loans really primarily is just due to freezing of payments, freezing of interest rates. Airlines with 26 billion, and that's obviously been an ongoing thing with limited travel. But then you start seeing higher education, children nutrition, and higher education is really just for public universities. Your Indiana universities, Purdue's, those collecting some sources of revenue to help offset some of the troubles that they've had there. So, which is kind of an interesting one because people are still collecting tuition, but they have had to reimburse things like, housing allowances, those types of things as students aren't in dorms. And even going into the fall, whether or not they go back to the physical campus or remain online. So just different packages going to all sources of funding that do seem to be keeping things kind of afloat for the short term. We'll see what that entails long term, like you continue to say about more stimulus or just more relief.
Yeah, and I think that when I heard Warren Buffett say recently that, when these things come about like they have, no one expected it. Bill, they just said that, look, you've got to get it out and money into the system. And he believes the Fed did what they needed to, and it's not going to be perfect at all, but you got to do it quickly and efficiently.
Well, and I think as we move closer to dialing up the economy, you're going to find different areas of the economy that are going to need stimulus. And you don't even really know, where you're going to need it until you start dialing this economy back up. So we've never, this is unprecedented times, and we've never gone through anything like this and tried to open up an economy that got shut off like a light switch. And now, as we said, we're going to be opening it up with a dimmer switch. So I think his comments about that he'll do whatever's necessary, that the Federal Reserve will do whatever's necessary, was encouraging, and it certainly the markets were encouraged by his comments, but because we just don't know, we don't know what's next, and I'm thankful that they're not baby stepping this, they're going all in.
Right, Bill. I think you make a really good point about just not knowing what is exposed yet. Even when you think about the state side, just the lost revenue that a state government has compared to a federal government, they can't print more money. So the states have to have a balanced budget by law. So Indiana can't, have expenses that exceed income. That becomes a problem. And so that's where that stimulus from the Fed helping state municipalities is a really big deal, because they just don't have the sales tax revenue, and they don't have even things like property tax that can become an issue as people are unemployed.
Yeah, it's a great point. To take that and just quickly talk about the market. So Matt, the market is we've had pretty good weeks here, and actually we've kind of laughed at it. It's a little bit surprising, but just a couple quick comments there.
Sure. It seemed like April was an interesting month. S&P, the Dow, the NASDAQ had some basically record month for a lot of those, some dating back 30 years, some dating back, 80 years. And what's interesting is you had 30 million people become and file unemployment, file for unemployment, a global pandemic, the Fed pumping about and the government pumping a little over $4 billion into the economy, and you have a record month. So there was just this really weird disconnect between what's actually going on profit-wise in the economy and what's going on in the marketplace. And so it'll be interesting to see how that navigates through into the second quarter with earnings coming out, because many companies weren't influenced too much with earnings for the first quarter, but it was definitely an interesting first quarter. It was definitely an interesting April. So we're prepared for what's to come.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. During these challenging times, we continue to have resources for each of you. And so what I would encourage you to visit our website under the Volatility Resource Center, and that would be at hilltopwellsolutions.com. We continue to put updated information. In fact, we've got a couple pieces in there that are updated, as well as we have a weekly webinar where we give folks really updated information as to the markets and what we see happening and what's happening in the overall markets. When we return on Your Wealth Health, we're gonna switch over to talk about estate planning. Do you have your estate plan in order? You know, what if something were to happen? Is all of your wishes carried out? So that is when we return.
At River Valley Construction Group, we pride ourselves on being one of the top deck builders in all of Michiana. If you want to have a beautiful deck, whether it be wood or composite, contact River Valley Construction Group today. River Valley Construction Group, where we're building your dream deck in 2020.
Welcome back to Your Wealth Health. I'm Erik Brenner, and thanks for joining me today. If you're watching us on Facebook, if you could hit that share button, we would appreciate it. You can also watch us each week on our YouTube channel, online as well. We are continuing to practice social distancing, so I'm in the studio with my camera person, and we have Bill Davis and Matt Aurenz that are joining me remotely, and so I appreciate their time and helping us talk through another important topic, which is estate planning. You know, this is one topic that when we talk to new folks, I would say 40 to 50% of the new folks that we meet either do not have an estate plan or it is not updated. And when I mean not updated, not reviewed, or has been done many, many years ago. Oftentimes, you know, folks do them when they have young children, and then they don't touch them again, and they may be outdated. And so what we want to do is just dive in a little bit more into really some important aspects of estate planning. And so, Bill, let's just talk about high level first. What are some important things that folks should think about?
Yeah, that's a good thing to talk about, Erik. It's during this pandemic, a lot of people have been thinking about their own mortality, and oh my gosh, what if this happens to me? So we thought maybe this would be a good topic to talk about today. So the first thing is going to be your will. You know, your will is going to settle your personal property. It's going to talk about custodians for children, guardians for children, custodians of their assets if they're under the age of majority. We like to have double check everybody's beneficiary designations on individual retirement accounts, 401ks, and include a contingent beneficiary as well. God forbid something happens to both the spouses in a married situation. So we'd like to have primary beneficiaries and contingent beneficiaries on all of those. We can have PODs, which are payable on death for your banking institutions, and then transfer on deaths for any investment accounts that you might have at investment firms. So that would cover in the event of death, but we're also worried about in the event of incapacity. So that would be a durable power of attorney. And that's going to at least let somebody step in and take care of your financial matters in the event that you are incapacitated, because if you go on a ventilator, you're not going to be able to communicate and pay bills and do those kinds of things. And then finally on this graphic, you can see we can have trust documents. Trust documents are a popular vehicle when we're especially when we have possibly underage children. We want to rule from our grave. We want to, have our wishes be met in the future, stretch money over beneficiaries over years to come. So any trust documents could also be a valuable tool for estate planning.
Yeah, Bill, thanks. And I think it's important to think about or know that a beneficiary is one of the best ways to pass an asset. And oftentimes I get folks say, well, it's in my will. Well, whoever the beneficiary is where that account's going to go. And so it's what I call the royal flush of estate planning, because it doesn't matter what your will says. And I've seen cases where someone thought that, someone named in the will was going to get this account when really a beneficiary was named on it and it wasn't that person. So you need to make sure that beneficiaries are correct. A couple other things that are really key is if there's a divorce involved, did you change, your beneficiaries there? As kids get older, did you change it? And another thing about beneficiaries is, if a child predeceases you and they have children, do you want their children to get the portion that your child should have received? Or do you want your remaining children, if there are remaining children, to get the portion? And that's all within the beneficiary planning. And Bill mentioned contingent beneficiaries as well. So really important for beneficiaries. So Matt, we also have, that's kind of the financial. We have more of the healthcare as well. And why don't we talk about those briefly?
Sure. I mean, the healthcare is an extremely important one, especially in this time. You need to have your HIPAA release forms. So that's really there for you to be able to talk to the medical physicians, doctors, nurses, hospitals about your loved one, and helping them with their medical directives, understanding what's going on in their situation. Things like living wills, which is, and healthcare directives. Those types of things are basically saying, hey, I want to have life support, don't want to have life support. Those difficult questions, again, all of that you need to make sure are in place. And you need to be able to execute on that if you're that directive, that healthcare directive. So those are the main ones. And the healthcare power of attorney, again, just as well, just being able to, things like taking them in for doctor's appointments, visits, those types of things, to just make sure that the medical attention that they're getting, whether it's at a nursing home or an assisted living, just a doctor's appointment, again, all of those things, that there's somebody there who can cognitively make the healthcare decision for them based on that person's wishes, all extremely important. And with privacy laws these days, again, the HIPAA release is going to be one of those imperative documents to help with those directives.
Yeah, and I think another important thing to think about, particularly in the environment we're in today, which I've had situations where, a client, unfortunately, had to go into hospital, did not have some of those documents in place. And we had the attorney actually go to the hospital and be able to kind of draft them quickly and get them done quickly. Well, the challenge becomes now is, we're not allowed in that healthcare environment. So the attorney can't go into the hospital. They can't meet with a doctor. They can't meet with the clients face to face. And so it becomes really a challenge there. So, we recommend an estate plan review, if you have one, at least every 3, no more than 5 years, and see if there's any updates. There may not be any updates, but there may be some updates, particularly on the areas of the healthcare directives. There's been a lot of updates over the years in laws on the healthcare directives, as well as the power of attorneys. And so those things definitely need to be reviewed. And, your view of the world as it relates to beneficiaries and how you want to have your assets distributed certainly may have changed over the years. So it's really important. So we've talked about the high level of estate planning, and when we return on Your Wealth Health, we're going to dig into more detail about estate planning, some of the things that you really want to think about as you're putting together your estate plan or renewing your estate plan. We just want to really give you some good information so that you can go to the attorney with some good information to make sure that you're updated and your estate plan is in order. So join me when we return. We're going to talk about more estate planning.
We get a lot of questions about down payment, and it's going to be applicant specific as well as vehicle specific. But the best part is right now, the down payments are as low as I can remember them being, because we have 2 or 3 additional promotions going on right now that different people qualify for. So it's crazy to see. I'm looking at a car going, that's the down payment? There's no way. I do the math again. I'm right. You know, it's just fantastic how low they've been.
Welcome back to Your Wealth Health. Thanks for joining me today. So we talked about some high-level things that you should think about immediately for your estate planning, but we want to dive into a couple more things you should think about. So Bill, it really, when it gets into estate planning, a lot of people think, well, I don't have a lot, or I don't need an estate plan. But we really do think that, you work hard for your money. People build their assets over time, and I think they want to see it go to where they want to see it go, not necessarily taxes and the government and so forth.
Well, I think most people don't understand that they're going to accomplish most of their estate plan from the beneficiary designations on their accounts. And the accounts that we highlight on this graphic are the retirement accounts, Roths, traditionals, and 401ks, their life insurance policies. That's commonly overlooked, and not just individual policies, but group policies through your employers. The healthcare policies could include things like disability provisions. Many people have taken out cancer policies, those kinds of policies. They should be checking on those. And then we talked a little bit in the last segment about contingent beneficiaries. I find this really important just in case something happens to a husband and a wife during these pandemics. We've heard of that happening, where both the husband and wife lose their life. And if you've got the contingent beneficiaries taken care of, then that's not going to be worrisome for people. They'll have it all taken care of.
Yeah, it's a great point. And part of it, Matt, is just getting people to just do it, right? So we often are the kind of the lead in saying, look, we're gonna just get this arranged for you just to get it done. And sometimes it's hard to make those decisions, but you just need to make a decision just to know that it's done correctly.
Right. I think you just have to make the decision and sit down and make a quick list of all the accounts that you have, and do you have appropriate primary and contingent beneficiaries listed on them? And if you don't, take corrective action. And most of them these days are pretty simple to do. People can log right online on their accounts and change the beneficiaries right there. So it's not like they have to request paperwork and sign it and notarize it and mail it back. Those days are pretty much over. So a lot of this can be done with just a couple mouse clicks and 10 minutes of your weekend.
Yeah, and so I think too about updating or making sure that your estate plan is updated. Length of time. So if you do have an estate plan, length of time if it hasn't been reviewed over 5 years, that's one. And there's a lot of other issues. And in future shows, we're gonna dive into that. So on Your Wealth Health, we really want to take your questions and we want to integrate your questions into our show. And so you can go to yourwealthhealth.com and hit submit a question and ask us any financial questions, and we'll try to integrate them on the show over the next many, many weeks as we do. And we do have a couple questions here I want to just address. First one is, if I'm retired, should I sell everything into cash? Bill, what do you think?
I think that would be an unwise move. Depending on how you were positioned prior to the market correction, you should have recovered quite a bit of the losses, and I would not be recommending liquidation to cash, because as cash rates are going to be basically zero, and you can consider it to be negative based on considering inflation, taking inflation into account.
Yeah, so I think it's a great point, right? If you're feeling uncomfortable about where it's at, everyone is. It doesn't matter your risk tolerance and where you're at. I mean, you're just not feeling comfortable at this point, and your risk tolerance should be addressed. But probably after we kind of get through this and there's been some leveling off, if you will, and then maybe make a change as it relates to risk tolerance and so forth. So another question here is, which is a great question that we had come in, Matt, is I'm in my 40s putting the most in my 401k. Unfortunately, my job seems secure. Should I put less in my 401k for a while until the markets settle down?
It's a great question. I think as long as your cash reserve is adequately funded, 3-6 months, even maybe prolong or stretching that out to 9 months or 12 months in this time, my answer would be no. I would say continue to make those contributions. You don't want to give up things like employer matches. There are obviously tax benefits along the way. So reduction in savings would offset a lot of those benefits. So again, just making sure your cash reserve is secure, and then continuing that funding. Plus you're buying in at lower rates, lower price per share, which, on a recovery should help you in the long run. So that would be my thought.
Yeah, that's a great point about cash reserves. So quickly, Bill, if someone, and we don't know in this case if they have adequate cash reserves, but if they don't have adequate cash reserves, they're fully funded in the 401k, probably building up some cash for good, but certainly in this time would be a good idea.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, yeah, if you don't have a cash reserve, you're going to have to back down your 401k contributions, understanding that that's going to affect, the taxability, because it's going in before tax. So, yeah, you might have to back down your 401k contributions a little bit and build up your cash reserve.
Of course, you could always, if you had to, you could always borrow from the 401k. I mean, there could be other options there, but you shouldn't stop. This is a great time, as Matt said, to dollar cost average into the market. It's just a great time. So next week's show, we have a special guest. His name is Robert Siciliano. Robert is a cybersecurity expert. He has spoken worldwide on cybersecurity. And many of you are working from home, just like we have folks on our team working from home. And so we're going to have Robert on. We're going to be able to ask questions of Robert and really get his take on how in this global pandemic you should protect yourself as well as beyond. So I'm really looking forward to that. Well, I'm out of time, and I want to say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us today. And so for Matt Aurenz and Bill Davis, we'll see you next week right here on Your Wealth Health.